Hey everyone, it's Amanda. So today I'm going to do a wrap up of all the books I have read from my last wrap up till present day. I don't think I'm going to do monthly wrap ups anymore. I'm still going to try the weekly wrap ups, but I haven't been doing very well with that. Anyway, these are the books that I have read since you saw me last. First one I have is Nothing to Lose by Alex Flynn. This was about a boy, a teenage boy, who runs away with a carnival, and right before or after, I can't remember, his mother is accused of murder. And it's about what happened with his mother and what his life is like now, and he's just kind of facing some of like the demons in his past. This book was really good. I found it to be very interesting. It was a deep book, and it definitely has trigger warnings for abuse. It was well written, pretty sad issues, and it kind of delves into a lot of issues and the psychology behind them. Just an interesting book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. It's been a long time since I read this one. I read it August 20th, so I don't remember a lot about some of these books. I apologize for that, but I do remember that this was very well written and I did enjoy it. Then I read Dark Lie by Nancy Springer. This is about a woman who is, I believe, in her 30s. When she was a teenager, she got pregnant and had to give her baby up for adoption. Her parents kind of made her do that. And now she has found out where her child is, where her daughter is. So she kind of has started like stalking her and just watching her. She's just so curious. And her daughter is now a teenager. One day she's watching her at the mall. Her daughter leaves the mall and she sees her being abducted. And so this main character, whose name is Dory, decides to follow this van and try to save her daughter, basically. And it goes into a crazy adventure of what happens next. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was pretty well written. It is very suspenseful. I also really liked with this book, the main character, Dory's parents, are religious, and they're the stereotypical religious Christian kind of people that I hate to see in books. I do realize there are people like that out in the world today, but there are also people out there that are genuine and aren't all about the fire and brimstone, and I don't know. I just hate when I see Christians in books a lot of times because they're portrayed in such a negative way if it's a secular book. And this book also had Dory and her husband who are Christians, and it kind of showed the contrast between those two groups of people, and I liked that. I found that very interesting and well done. I ended up giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It was good, but it didn't keep me on the edge of my seat. I do have another book by Nancy Springer that I do want to read at some point soon because I did enjoy her writing. I also read Show of Hands by Anthony McCartan. I had found this at the Dollar Tree about last year, and I thought the concept sounded so interesting. It is about a used car salesman who is really doing poorly in his business, so he comes up with this contest where people have to come put a hand on a car, and they have to keep their hand on there, and whoever is the last one standing wins, and they win a car. They cannot sit, they have to stand, and they get a bathroom break, like I think 15 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that, every 2 hours. And that's basically the gist of the contest. And the story is really good in that it goes into what these people go through in their mind, the psychological torture that comes from doing something like this. I found that to be so interesting. This book really reminded me of The Long Walk by Stephen King. Now that book is a lot more sinister, it's a lot grittier, but this book is still similar in the way you see how this is affecting their mind and how not sleeping can really get to you. I really enjoyed this. I was pleasantly surprised by it. I went into it not expecting much, and I found it to be very good. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I also read Amy and Roger's Epic Detour by Morgan Matson. This book is extremely talked about, extremely loved. It is about Amy and Roger who end up taking a detour as they're taking a road trip across country. Amy has had a tragedy in her life, and she has to get the car to the other side of the country because her mom's there waiting for her, and Roger comes along. He's a family friend to drive for her, and I thought it was really good. They're both working through some stuff. The thing that I really liked about this book was the romance, because it was so realistic. It felt much more realistic than a lot of books I've read, especially YA books, where you meet someone and the next minute you're in love. This was not like that. It was very slow, and there was a lot more friendship at first, and it was just really, really sweet in that way. I didn't find it extremely entertaining. I did enjoy reading about the places they visited. I thought that was really fun, but contemporary isn't always my favorite. So it kind of was a little bit on the boring side at times, got a little bit long for me, but overall I did find it to be really good, and I gave it 4 stars. Just finished reading Still Missing by Chevy Stevens. I read That Night by Chevy Stevens at the very beginning of the year and really, really loved it. Her writing is wonderful. Now, as I read this, I was still in a reading slump. I feel like I might finally be slowly getting out of it. When I read a book in a reading slump, I never enjoy it as much as I would if I was into reading. I gave this another chance, another time. I might enjoy it more, but I did find it interesting. It is a hard book to read. It's about a woman named Annie who's a real estate agent. One day she's having an open house and she's closing up, and a guy comes to look at the house and ends up abducting her and taking her to a cabin in the woods. She does get away at some point. You'll kind of find out how she is removed from the situation, but you know that she is because the story is told in her therapy sessions. She is narrating it to her psychiatrist and giving them the story, and that's what you're reading. It's almost like a 2-part story, so it's like during and then after, and it was very interesting. There was a shocking part that I did not expect that I thought was an interesting, clever twist, but I don't know. There was just something about it that did not grab me. I thought That Night was much better, but I've heard so many people talk about this one. This is the one everyone seems to talk about when they talk about this author. So I don't know. I gave it 4 stars. I still thought it was good, but it wasn't as great as my expectations were for it. I also read Heart of the Matter by Emily Giffin. I got this at the Goodwill. Just really drawn in by the cover, and I've been curious about her because I've heard a lot about this author. I found this to be very good. This is about a woman who is married to her husband, who is a pediatric plastic surgeon, and then there's another woman who has a son. She's a single mom, and at some point their lives kind of collide, these two women, and this deals with some very heavy issues. This book got very uncomfortable for me to read. I got very, very angry as I read this book at some points because it deals with things that just kind of infuriate and enrage me. But she does bring it around to the point where I was satisfied. I wasn't ready to throw the book across the room. There were some points where I was saying to my husband, this book is driving me crazy. I hate this book, but I had to keep reading. So that's good. I ended up giving this 4 stars as well. Would totally recommend Emily Giffin if you enjoy adult contemporary. Then I read Never Look Away by Linwood Barkley. This was a really good book about a man who is with his wife and young son at an amusement park, and he turns around, his son is missing, and after that, that's all I can say because it goes crazy after that, and there's so much that happens that everything would be a spoiler. But I found this to be such a great story. I was gripped from the first page to the last page. I thought it all worked out so well. There were parts of the story where I was like, this has nothing to do with anything, but in the end it did. It all kind of is woven together. He's very good at weaving stories together. I really enjoyed this. I gave this 5 stars, and I would totally recommend it. I want to read more books by Linwood Barclay in the future. I found it to be very, very good. Those are all the physical books that I've read. I also read, I think, 3 books on my Kindle, or 2 books on my Kindle and a library book. So I'm going to talk about those next. I checked What Alice Forgot out of the library, and it is by Liane Moriarty. It is about a woman named Alice who, I believe she's in her 30s. She's at the gym one day in her spin class. She falls off the machine and hits her head. When she wakes up, she thinks she is, I believe, 29 years old, and she's happily married. Everything is great. And then she comes to find out she's 39 years old. It's 10 years later than she thought it was, and things are not so great in her marriage or her life. And it was just really interesting to me. It almost felt like a time travel book because she's seeing things that didn't exist 10 years ago. Someone tells her to text them, and she has no idea what that means because 10 years ago, texting really wasn't something people did. It was really enjoyable, a lot of fun. I found it to be a really well-written story. I really do enjoy Liane Moriarty's books. I still didn't love it as much as Big Little Lies. Big Little Lies is still my favorite. I would say The Husband's Secret would be second place, and then this would be third place. But it was still really good. I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I also read The Night Sister by Jennifer McMahon. I received this for free from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. I read this on August 28th. So you would think I would remember a whole lot about it, and I really have to rack my brain to remember what that book was about. So it did not leave an impression on me. It was not very memorable. On Goodreads, I wrote that the twists were predictable a bit. I loved the old motel that was in this story. It kind of reminded me of the movie Psycho. It does jump back and forth between past and present. One thing I remember is that the characters were very confusing. There were a lot of characters, and it was hard to keep track of them and understand like who was who. I didn't like that. It's awful. I just really don't remember much about this book, and I feel awful that I don't, but it really didn't stand out to me. I gave it 3 stars, so it wasn't that special to me. I did read 2 other books by Jennifer McMahon. I loved The Island of Lost Girls. I kind of felt the same way about Dismantled as I did about this one. I was so excited that I was accepted to read this through NetGalley, and I was a little disappointed. So I also received Awake by Natasha Preston from NetGalley, but I have to be honest, I was unable to finish this book. It was one of the worst books I have read in a long time. The Insta-love started on one page, and the next page they were like, she was planning their wedding. It was crazy, the Insta-love. It was the most instant Insta-love I've ever seen in a book. It was about this girl, she's a teenager. She has a problem because she can't remember anything from before she was 4 years old. I'm trying to think of how many memories I have before the age of 4. I remember when we moved into our new house, which was when I was 3, because that was a big day. That was like a big event, but I think that may be the only thing I remember. So I don't know, but everyone was making such a big deal about it in the book that this was like a horrible thing, and really it just didn't make sense to me. Plus the plot was kind of silly, and the writing was not very good. I just did not like this book. I ended up DNFing it at 25%. I was trying so hard to get to 50% because I like to try to read half of the book, but I just could not do it. So that book was definitely not for me. The last book is another book I got through NetGalley, and it is The Lost Girl by R.L. Stine. It is the 3rd book in the Fear Street relaunch. I was really excited to get this one as well. This just made my day because I was a huge Fear Street fan. If you watch my videos, you probably know that. This book could have went in such a great place, but to me it was still not, I don't feel like it was worked out enough. I didn't feel like it went far enough, and I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. I feel really sad when I read Fear Street books now because they had so much magic for me when I was in high school. I loved them so much, and now as an adult when I read them, I'm just sad because they aren't as great as I thought they were, and it makes me feel a little bit disappointed. It's kind of sad. This book was very graphic and gory. It had some scenes that reminded me of a Stephen King book. I did like that, but I don't know. The plot wasn't that interesting to me, and the story was just okay. So that one was 2.5 stars, and again, it is not a very memorable book. I remember the one really crazy scene in the book, and it goes from past to present, and it's all about trying to solve this mystery, but not the best book I've read. Those are all of the books I have read since you saw me last. I am currently reading Frostbite by Rochelle Mead, and I'm also reading Home by Matthew Costello, which is the second book in the Vacation duology. So I'll be talking about those in a future video, and thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.